Greetings, Jelly Spoons, and welcome back to this week's episode of Monday Madness. I know it's coming to you on Tuesday. I am very sorry about that. I have been away doing first aid training courses and also my voice is shot, so please enjoy this video. So, as you guys might remember, a few months ago now, I asked some of my Patreons what they thought about making a brand new OC for me to start telling stories with. These guys have been voting. You guys have been voting over on Instagram and TikTok as well, and I have created the beginnings of a character. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to use some of the writing prompts you guys gave me over on Instagram and TikTok, and I'm going to use those to create technically 2/3 stories. So 2 of the stories I'm going to combine, and they are going to set the scene and start this OC character's adventure story. More on that in a second. And the other one, well, it was a specific request. Actually, a few of you requested more about this character, so I'm bringing you more of this character. So one of my current D&D characters is a cleric boy called Cyure, and yeah, he's been having a few adventures and I've been doing cosplays of him on TikTok, so you guys wanted more and a few of you asked, so I have taken some of the ones that sounded similar, smushed them all together, and I'm going to give you a bonus story with a what would happen if Cyure was in this kind of situation. So we're going to hear about that, and in the other situation with the OC, this is where I'm going to need you guys' help, because we are going to officially be starting, so this is the starting video, starting this OC's adventures. So the way we're going to be doing this is that you guys are going to vote down in the comments. I'm going to put some snippets up on TikTok as well, and you guys are going to vote for what this character does next. So at the end of every video, there are going to be a couple of choices, things that could happen, and I'm going to get you guys to vote on what you want to happen next. I might give people on Patreon a few more things to vote on, so if you want to come and join me over on Patreon, come and do so, and then I will combine all of that into the next part of his adventure. And I really want to get back into posting every week. I know currently I am trying to do that, but it's 1 week here, 1 week on the P.1 lore account, and I'm going back and forth. I really want to try and post more often than that on both of them, so setting myself up for failure here, promising things that I can't quite deliver if I get crazy busy, but I really want to. I really enjoy filming these videos, and when it's improv storytelling, I don't need to pre-prepare too much, so I should have some time now and then. So you might not always get me in cosplay acting it out, but you will get me telling you some stories, and then at the end you guys can vote on what you want the OC to do next. So join me in the comments down below at the end of this video and vote for what you want the OC to do next. We're not voting for Cyure though. Cyure, he has plenty going on in the D&D campaign right now, so the Cyure story is just a little extra snippet, and I think we'll begin with Cyure. So hold on to your hats for the OC beginning story, which I will start with at the end of this video, so the beginning at the end, but right now, to delve us in, we're going to start with a tiny little short story about what would happen if Cyure was attacked by bandits. Cyure is often by himself. This is by personal choice. He wants to be by himself. He enjoys being by himself. And more importantly, he feels safest by himself. He grew up in a family where his older brother and his younger sister were amazingly talented. His brother is a very important politician now. His younger sister is a performer going to a performing arts school. And as the classic middle child, he shied away from a lot of the attention and ended up not really minding when his parents, well, to put it nicely, forgot about him quite a lot. He gave the spotlight to his other siblings gladly and willingly and supported them as much as he could, which did mean that he got pushed to the wayside. And he got used to being by himself. It became his normal. This gave him a strange sort of resilience that he would not realize he had, an ability to cope with being lonely. He didn't even notice anymore when he was. He was by himself for the majority of his birthdays as his siblings aged and got important things to do. He was by himself when he moved into his college dorm. He was sitting by himself when he was in his lessons. He was always by himself in the library. He was by himself in the dormitory while everyone else was out at clubs and societies and socializing. And as he delved further into his research and realized he really wanted to be a healer, he decided that the best way to do this was through chastity. A chastity that had been thrust upon him, but he didn't mind. He thought that this was the true way to be of some sort of use in the world, and that, after all, is the only thing he ever wanted. He didn't want fame or power or glory. He didn't even want thanks for the healing that he could do. He just wanted to be of use. And that is how, one day, very late at night, when Cyure was studying in the library by himself, he heard a voice calling his name. It was a dark voice, a voice that dripped with blood and malice, but also a longing, a want, a feeling Cyure had never felt directed at him before. And that's why he answered. The voice that spoke to him promised it could give him healing powers and the ability to aid anyone. It gave him warmth, it caressed his face, and when finally the creature appeared before him, Cyure took it for a deity. Cyure agreed to serve under him and be his cleric. He focused on this, he adored this, everything he could now do. He worshipped his deity, he prayed to him, he spoke to him. Every day he became intoxicated by this creature. And slowly, the creature became just a little intrigued by him in return. But we can go more into that another day. Today we're going to hear about Cyure being attacked by bandits. As we stated before, Cyure was almost always by himself. At least physically by himself. At least visually by himself. At least to the odd passerby, to any unsuspecting soul, to any who had no idea what to look for. He appeared completely alone, all the time. But now, ever since that dark night in the library when the voice had crooned his name and Cyure had pledged allegiance to him, he was never really alone. Not anymore. And so, the young blonde-haired cleric, who appeared for all the world to be completely by himself, was walking back from a very, very lavish library late one night. He had been there far longer than he had intended, but finally he had secured entrance. Not an easy thing to do. But his headmistress had written him a note approving his visit after he had done so well in all of his exams and proved himself a very exceptional healer and student. And so Cyure had been invited to spend the day at the biggest library the country had. It had taken him an hour to walk there at 6 a.m. that morning. He had no money for a horse and cart, but he didn't mind because it was a very exciting day. He only had a small bag with him. He had some food for the journey, some water, and several notebooks. Nothing was allowed to leave this library. Everything remained in its archives. He could take as many notes as he wanted, but that was it. He was incredibly excited. And so, when the clock was striking near midnight, he set off on a long journey back to his college, thrilled with everything he had managed to do and research that day. He was not on high alert, too distracted from the thrill of the day, and so it wasn't until the blade was at his throat that he realised there was someone else with him on the path. As his steps came to an immediate halt, he noticed looming figures in the shadows, stepping out onto the trail. 1, 2, 3, 4, and the fifth one behind him, blade at his throat, pulling his head back. They demanded money, they demanded riches, they demanded anything he had upon his person. He tried to explain that all he had was notes and that it wouldn't be of much great use to any of them. He doubted, unless they were clerics. He began to stumble over some of his words and they laughed at him. They thought him weak for this, and perhaps they weren't wrong, but really it was because Cyure was terrible at speaking to other people and stumbled over pretty much every word, even on a subject he was very confident in. The attack truly began when they tried to take his bag from him. Cyure refused to hand it over, telling them over and over he didn't have anything. He had no money, no riches, nothing he could give them. Please, could they leave him alone and be on their way? He just wanted to go. And he couldn't quite say home. He wasn't going home. He was going to his college. But then his home had never really felt homey. And then immediately he felt bad for thinking that at all. Distracted by this, he snapped out of it as the bag was dragged and pulled over his shoulders, the blade still at his throat, holding him backwards. He screamed, calling out for them, "Please, no, don't. That's important research. I can never get it back." They laughed at him. They tipped the bag out and everything, its contents, spilling all over the floor. They assumed he must be hiding something. Some of their number crouched down, examining the things that had fallen out of the bag. All they found were pens, pencils, writing implements, scraps of food, some water. They raged and stomped at this, and as they did so, the pages began to scatter in the breeze. Cyure yelped, trying to move forwards to retrieve the fallen pages, but he couldn't. The blade still sat deep at his throat. And so he had to watch, as in a matter of seconds, nearly all of his research, his painstaking research in his tiny, scrawled handwriting, filling as much of the page as possible, was scattered across the path. He saw mud puddles, he saw muddy boots, he saw muddy souls and muddy hearts, and he just knew that if he did not act now, he would never, ever get any of it back. And that's when the voice came again. The warm, heated voice that Cyure had heard calling his name in that dark library. The voice he had pledged himself to. The voice that gave him his powers, the voice that promised him everything, the voice that Cyure trusted. All it said in this violent moment was, trust yourself. And for the first time in a long time, Cyure did. And so Cyure acted, exactly as his deity commanded. He trusted himself. He didn't think about it. He called upon the magic his deity had embedded within his soul. As it lit up in his hands, without thinking what he was doing, Cyure cast the spell. And in a huge rush of wind and feathers, there stood, shimmering in the air, stretching out from Cyure's right arm, a vast, shimmering, pale gold wing. It hung there in the air for a moment, awaiting his instruction. And, continuing without thinking, Cyure slashed his arm, sending the wing shattering down upon the bandits in front of him. One of them was caught in the face by razor-sharp feathers, one of them across the stomach, one of them down the arm. They all fell backwards in alarm and surprise, looking for their weapons. Again the wing flashed forwards, making the fourth man fall. The blade at his throat jutted suddenly and deeply into the skin. Trickles of blood began to pool and swim all the way down the cleric's neck. And as he reached up, scrabbling to pull the hand at the blade away from his throat, he tried to swing wildly, sending the wing crashing around behind him. But something else had happened. Something else mere seconds ago. Something else that Cyure had not yet noticed. As soon as the first drops of blood began to run down the cleric's throat, a dark, shadowy figure bathed in red had emerged, erupting from the air just beside him. The dark heat radiating from this figure was enraged. And the last words the bandit holding the dagger to Cyure's throat ever heard were these.
He is mine. Don't you dare.
As Cyure left the trees, entering into the moonlight, rounding a corner, heading back to the city where his college was, he was no longer walking by himself. The deity kept a steady, solid pace beside him, one hand holding his own. Alright, that's your Cyure story. If you want me to go more into him and his anything, let me know in the comments down below and I will do some more Cyure stories. In the meantime, we're going to dive into our OC story. Now, for this one, you guys are going to be voting on what you want to happen next, what you want this guy to do. So, all we know about him so far is this. So, the only things we know about this character so far, who doesn't even have a name yet, are the things that you guys voted for. So, we've got the race, which is Fae and Celestial. So, those both tied, so we have got a Fae parent and a Celestial parent. We've got their background, which is that they grew up on the open road, travelling around, and this is either happily or unhappily, as yet undecided. The only feature is they have long, fair hair. Their personality is now fiery, untrusting, and a bit of a loner. I would have enjoyed anything you guys voted for, but this one in particular, it's a great starting off point, a building block for a character. You get to dig into why they're the way that they are, and then slowly peel the onion a little bit, you know, and make them come out of their shell, and then hastily put them back into it when things go horribly wrong, that kind of thing. So, fiery and untrusting loner. And the last thing that we know about them that you guys voted for is their skills. So they are good at fighting, assessing things, and winding people up. So with all this in mind, if you guys think of a name for this character, I'm going to go with they, he for them because, well, it's me. So they're a he, they, and they need a name. So while you guys get thinking of a name down in the comments below, I am going to start off with the story. Now, I have combined a lot of different prompts together, and several of them were quite similar, so if you hear one that sounds like yours, but isn't quite exactly the same worded, it probably is yours, I just combined it together. So I've combined all of these together to make 4 prompts, and this is what we're going to use to begin the story. So, the prompts are these, and I've also paired them up. So, the first pairing is 2 familiar eyes, and walking into a town at sunset. So we're going to combine those 2 together. And the other one, and I think you'll see why I paired these 2 together, is enemies to lovers with the hurt and not noticing until they drop trope, and someone hired to kill the prince who winds up falling in love with him instead. Well, yep, it's getting gay, folks. All right, let's do this. I'm going to start with the first pair of prompts. 2 familiar eyes and walking into a town at sunset. So, That's where we're going to begin. This is where this character's journey is going to start. Walking into a town at sunset. There's a reason they've walked in so late at night. They usually wear darker clothes, their hair is fair and long, but it doesn't stand out too much with the rest of their outfit. They walk carefully and quietly through this town. They know exactly what and who they are looking for. They've been trailing this family for weeks. Desperate now for the money. They need to get this commission. If they don't, they may not be able to eat for a very, very long time. But when they succeed, oh, this money will feed them for a year. They have to do it. They've killed before, of course, many times, sometimes not even for money. But this time, it's the biggest target they've ever gone for. It's a prince. It's royalty. Not heir to the throne royalty, but still, the third in line. A lot of security. You have to time your moment. You only get one. As soon as someone makes an assassination attempt, they close ranks, and they will protect the prince until their very last. He gets one chance, and that is it. And so he assessed the castle where they all lived, deciding very quickly that it was a very bad idea. But they were going travelling, and this was where the opportunity arose. The king and his 3 sons, the oldest heir to the throne, the middle one, and the youngest, his target. The king and the 3 princes were all travelling in carriages right in front of him, surrounded by guards on horseback, guards on foot, guards carrying spears, guards carrying guns, guards carrying swords, guards carrying any number of weapons. But he could do this. He was determined. He had a sort of plan. He didn't rely on plans too much. Plans could backfire and go wrong. Once you got comfortable relying on a plan, things could go wrong around you and you couldn't manage to keep up with it. No. Instead, he went with his gut. He assessed the situation, always looking, reassessing, scanning over and over. And when opportunity arose, and it would, he would take it and strike. Be gone, and he'd have his money by the next dawn. It had not taken long to work out which carriage the 3rd prince was in. The king had the most guards, the heir to the throne had the 2nd most, and so on. And this carriage, blissfully, wonderfully, beautifully, was at the very back. Still surrounded by guards, but nowhere near as many. Some of them were even talking and chatting amongst themselves as they were travelling along. The town they were passing through was not large, but there were still crowds out to greet them, and the soldiers became distracted at once with the people in the crowd, some of whom threw things, but most of whom were just baying for attention, desperate to get to the windows, holding things, pictures and pens, wanting autographs and photos, holding up cameras and phones, trying to get pictures. Did I mention this is a modern magic fantasy setting? Well, here we are. The guards were all distracted, keeping the townspeople at bay. There was an opening, and he would take it. He darted up the nearest drain pipe, clambering onto the roof, careful not to scatter any of the shingles. He tapped across, always looking down, tracking that cart over and over. The opportunity presented itself perfectly as they turned a corner. A huge throng of gathering people sprung towards them. They were aiming for the king's carriage predominantly, but also their beloved oldest prince. He was well known throughout the land and very popular. And so, several of the guards from the back ran to the front to help protect him. And in that moment, the character, who as yet does not have a name, jumped. He landed quietly, expertly, catching himself on the very back of the carriage, holding and tucking himself in around the beautiful, ornate designs. They hid him perfectly, obscuring him from view from any who may have glanced around. None saw him. Really, they thought, looking around them at the back of the carriage as they rolled on and on. It was a bit ridiculous. Huge, great, golden vestiges, like statues, on a carriage. And for what? Still, it had gained him access, and he was not about to turn his nose up at it. Slowly, carefully, and completely unseen, he slid in through the open window and in to the 3rd prince's carriage. I'm not going to lie to you, Jelly Spoons. Part of me wants to leave the story here, but we're going to keep it going. We're going to press forward just a little bit, but I don't think I'm going to take this enemies to lovers all the way to the end yet. We'll see. So we've done one prompt already, walking into a town at sunset. We know why he's done this. We've got a few more prompts to get going, so yeah, I've got an idea. Let's go with it. The character, as of yet without a name, had only made one small miscalculation. He had assumed that the prince would be travelling facing in the direction the carriage was going. It turned out he was not. And so, when the character, as of yet without a name, flung themselves gently and deftly through the window of this carriage, aiming to land sitting opposite the prince, in actual fact, he landed right in the prince's lap. Oh, it's the cutest of meet cutes. Here we go. The prince had been relaxed, his arms spread behind him, his eyes closed, his legs up on the opposite seat, resting, trying to get some sleep, and listening to the doof, doof, doof of the horse's hooves. His relaxed state was rapidly interrupted by the thud of a body landing on top of his own. He sat up, eyes opening immediately, and looked. And as he looked, his eyes, rich and beautiful, a dark, dark, dusty brown, met pale blue eyes that felt somehow familiar. Too familiar. Something, somewhere in the back of the prince's soul, gave a judder, and his heart leapt and skipped several beats. They both blinked at each other for a couple of moments, each trying to catch their breath and think of something to say. Words were difficult just at the moment. The guards carried on trotting outside, the crowd continued to bay and roar, and no one had noticed the sudden invader to the third prince's carriage. Immediately, the character without a name shot out his hand, ready to cover the prince's mouth. The prince, however, batted him away in an instant, and rather than doing what was expected, shouting immediately for help, the prince raised an eyebrow, looking the intruder up and down, before saying, quite calmly, "You do know Frederick is in the second carriage." The character without a name yet blinked again, and then spoke. And we haven't decided on an accent for them yet, and I hope you will take pity on me when you decide to vote for one. So for now, I shall give him a generic roguey voice. The character without a name blinked several times, looked at the prince in shock and surprise, and all he could manage to say was, "Yeah, I know." It was the prince's turn to blink again this time, and he stared at the intruder, still not moving him from his lap. The prince said, "So you're not here to assassinate the heir to my father's throne, then?" The character without a name yet shook his head. "I make no mistakes. I'm here to kill you." The prince threw his head back and laughed. "Oh, well, that's all right then. Wouldn't want you to be making any mistakes, would we? Gosh, why, may I ask? Why? For what point and purpose? At all? I have plenty of money. You can have that. Who on earth would want me dead?" The character without a name yet drew back a couple of inches. This time it was he looking the prince up and down. Was there something he'd missed? Usually people were begging and pleading for their lives at this point. "Why are you not scared? What's wrong with you?" He's a blunt character. The prince sat at his leisure, his arm still casually slung over the seat back behind him, quite enjoying this new turn of events. He said as much. "Well, it's quite the most exciting thing that's happened to me in a very long time. I must say, bravo. Getting past all those guards, you really picked your moment. No one even spotted you. I barely noticed you till you were, well, where you are now." It was at this point that the character still without a name realised that he was still sitting princess style across the prince's lap where he had landed. He got up, immediately banging his head onto the roof of the carriage. He drew two long, dark blades out from under his robes. The prince smiled, looking them over. "Gosh, you are quite intimidating, aren't you? Where were you hiding those? I'm very impressed." The character without a name drew both blades high into the air, gnashed his teeth, and jumped, landing straddled, one leg either side of the prince. He flung the blades forwards, each landing either side of the prince's throat, enough to nick and draw blood, but not kill him just yet. And I kind of want that to be where I leave it for now. I know one of the prompts is not noticing that you are down until you are down and out, and I will probably try and incorporate that one later on. But for now, I'm going to say that's where I will end it. That is where the story is so far. So please get down in the comments below and let me know, what do you think should happen next? I will give you 3 options. If you have any other ideas, chuck those in as well. But for the ease of smushing them all together, I will give you 3 rough options. Option number 1 is the character can continue attempting to do his job and try to murder the prince. Option number 2 is that the prince will now reveal a hidden weapon. Perhaps a literal weapon he's got hidden somewhere around him that he can use. Perhaps he has magic. Perhaps there's someone guarding him, invisibly sat in the seat opposite, who's laughing away. Perhaps he can call upon some sort of magical creatures. Something that the prince has that he will attempt to defend himself with. That's option number 2. Option number 3, the final option, is that something happens outside to distract them both. Maybe the king has someone attempting to assassinate him. Maybe the crowds have gathered and things are rocking and the carriages are smashing into each other. Something happens. And if you have any ideas for specifics for these, let me know in the comments down below as well. So that is the end of the beginning of this OC's adventures. Let me know your votes down below. So the 3 options for how this story can continue. Option number 1, he will attempt to assassinate the prince. Option number 2, the prince will start fighting back with a secret weapon of his own. Option number 3, something happens outside the carriage which distracts both of them. Let me know what you think down in the comments down below. Thank you for following my content. I am very sorry that my throat is completely gone today. I will attempt to come back next Monday with the next part of this video, and we will continue from there. If enough of you vote quickly enough, I guess I could bring you another story very, very quickly. And as it goes on, I'm going to attempt to do some quick little videos over on TikTok of the story as it unfolds. But I will let you guys vote for a bit more, and everyone on my Patreon, you guys can vote for some more specifics as well. We're going to get the story going a little bit, and then I'll start acting it out on TikTok as well. All right, any other things you'd like me to talk about, stories, whatever, things you want to invent, ideas you've got, chuck them down in the comments below. And don't forget to vote for options 1, 2, or 3 as well. And give him a name, please. Give this poor they, he a name. We need to name this character. All right, have fun, have an amazing day, be wonderful to each other. Goodbye, my wonderful jelly spoons. Goodbye.